take notice of all the sounds near and far. And just also sense your breath as it is, so nothing to manipulate. So thinking does occur in meditation, and it's natural. So the invitation is to just take a seat in the role of the observer. So use the mind to see the mind as it is. Nothing to change, nothing to fix. Just open the eyes slow, just take in light and shadow and reflection. Look around the room, re-enter the space. Yeah. Namaste, everybody. Please say to each other. Namaste. Great. Namaste, Facebook. Okay. So welcome to the info session for the 200-hour Multidisciplinary Yoga Teacher Training here at the Spring. Took a couple years off from this training just to work a little deeper on my own stuff. And I figured if I'm still to teach this, it's good to take some breaks from time to time, refine, and prune, kind of like a garden, you know? You gotta do some weeding, cultivate some other stuff. So it really is a mixture of ancient technologies and also modern creativity. And to me, yoga is many things. It's been delivered in a way that has been kind of religious or even cultish. And also now we can see another end of that spectrum, which is more commercial and industry. So somewhere between all that, there is artistry and there's craft, and some people even say science. So that's where I am more, in between art and science, or craft. And I encourage people to be as they are, that there's really no other way to be. I used to think I needed to be like this, I needed to be like that, and that was more from my background in performing arts, because I was in the theater for 10 years. And so I know how to act, I know how to put on a show, and that bled into the first decade, I would say, of teaching yoga. And as I got deeper into the studies, I had the rug pulled out from under me, banged in the head, knocked down, and then it kept on going and going and going. And then I was like, oh, this is what it is to release my ego, release myself from myself and get a little bit of liberation. So that's still happening to this day, and that's why I wrote on my seatbelt, "Be nice," and clip it in, because that's still part of me, this shadow side. So I say that because think it's important for us all to realize that the deeper understanding of things, yogic and meditational, are the multifaceted idea of what it is to be a human. You know, we have all these sides. We have dark sides, we have light sides, and hues of gray and hues of different colors in between, which makes up the personality. So we will look at modern variations of mind-body systems. So there's these yogas that have been created in the past 100 years. Primarily the Alexander technique is what I started with in the theater, and my mentor in the theater used that, and she also used asana postures and pranayama breathing to calm us down before going on stage. And then she started working with me one-on-one and taught me about energy, and I learned about energy, prana, or chi, or rather ki, ki, Japanese, from martial arts. And that's why I talk a lot about the hara in my classes, which is right here. There's a whole book on it. So with that being said, primarily from the ancient aspects of what the training is about, we'll look at things yogic, things Buddhist, and then things Taoist. Not in a religious sense, but more, again, through arts and science and craft. We can talk about religion, we can talk about psychology, and we can talk about the many different manifestations that this has been in and is still in to this day. And then the encouragement really for everyone in the training is to really use discernment, use a skilled means to figure out, is this good for me or not? And me as the director and the creator of the training, I'm just a tour guide. And I'll take you places and I'll show you things, and it's your choice whether you want to go this way or that way, and then just report back with your findings. And really the only thing I can do is be there with you throughout the process. So this isn't really a cookie cutter training, and it's not a checklist training. There will be requirements for you to complete the 200 hours of the training, and then use that to register, if you want, for the Yoga Alliance to become a registered yoga teacher. But more so, my aim is just to offer the beauty and the depth and the breadth of what I find really wonderful and interesting, complex, and sometimes quite simple way of living. You know, with the body, with the breath, with the spirit, with each other. And part of that is postures. So that was a mouthful. Does it make sense? All that stuff? So, and feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions while I continue here. I put out these books to let you know about some of the angles where I'm coming from. Here's the Mula Bandha. So remember we've been talking about that in class, the Master Lock. So this is a book that talks all about the Master Lock, and you're probably familiar with the Kegel exercises, or you know when you go visit the doctor and you have to give a sample. So there's a whole book on it, and some yogas use this with their whole physical form the entire time. I don't encourage it. I encourage it every once in a while, maybe when heavy lifting. And so the bandhas, we'll talk about those as well in the training. These are the three major ones, and I've talked about those in my class, which are really good to, in general, with many different things, or you know, posturing, even hiking if you have a backpack, and so on and so forth. We'll look at also physiology, kinesiology, and the planes of movement. So Rochelle and these might be familiar to you. These are what we do in class: the side to side, the front and back, and the twist to twist. So I really encourage people just to take the anatomical look as well, because some of us are more scientific minded, maybe more medical minded. So that's part of the multidisciplinary mix as well. This is a simple drawing of the koshas. So in yogic psychology, we have 5 bodies, and they're abbreviated here. They don't have the full Sanskrit name, but we have a physical body, we have an energy body, a mental body, and then we have a higher mind, and then a bliss state, and we'll talk about those as well. So I'm kind of jumping around here and there, but it all blends in certain ways. And in the training, we'll not only look at yogic psychology, but also Buddhist psychology and the similarities that they have. Many yogas come from a viewpoint of an 8-limbed path, so 8 sections, and Buddhism is often referred to as an 8-fold path. So there's some similarities there too. And then when you get to Taoism, Tao is like way. That's one way to define Tao, way or path. So Taoism was also affected by Confucianism, and Confucian thought was also affected by Buddhist thought, and Buddhist thought was affected by yogic thought, and the yogic thought, and so on and so forth. So it kind of blends all over the place. And that's why I call my company Silk Road Yoga, because if you know anything about the Silk Road, it was an ancient trade route, primarily from India to China, but some people say even from Europe, all in Africa, Europe, all the way through to Japan. And unfortunately, the Taliban blew up a bunch of Buddhas a while ago, so that was on the Silk Road. Anyhow, so the connectivity is all there, and it's really your choice as to how you want to form it for you. But speaking of form and the program, it's a 6-month program, and we have 6 weekend intensives. And to give it some form, so it's not so nebulous and abstract, because I'm really great at nebulous and abstract. I'm like an expert at it. Each weekend has an archetype, and that's to give it some shape and give it a graduated feeling with it. So the first weekend is called the Wanderer. And the Wanderer is where we look at these belief systems primarily. And we also look at the idea of self in modern psychology and Western psychology. In Buddhism, there's a belief that we don't have a self, or more like we don't have a solid sense of self. So we'll look at that, like what that's all about. In yoga, there is a belief that we have a self. In Buddhism, they think, well, that's what gets you in trouble, yourself, desires and aversion. And yoga is like, well, yeah, I'll get you in trouble, but you have to liberate yourself from yourself. So that's an interesting debate. And we will have debates as well. And then you look at the way, the Tao, and that has a very different viewpoint of self and correlation to nature, so ecology. And one idea of suffering in Taoism is that when humans are not in tune with the natural realm, that's when there's a lot of chaos and disorder. And it even talks about chaos and disorder in the natural realm. Krista, you're talking about the tsunami in Thailand, and what happens with that. How to work with the elements when they do get into a chaotic state. So part of the training as well is we will wander out around here and into nature, because I feel nature can do so much. As those of us who know spend a lot of time out in nature, it can do all the work that we need. It's a wonderful yoga in and of itself. So the first weekend is the Wanderer. We'll also look at communication skills, deep listening like you all are doing here wonderfully. And we'll look at semantics, ways to speak, and also ways to communicate with one another and the yoga of relationships. That's all in the first weekend. It's very, very packed. Second weekend is the Warrior Weekend. And I've been thinking about changing the name of that because there's so much warrior culture, and I've worked with warriors for over 9 years now. I was thinking maybe calling it more Guardian, because I think that's the deeper realm of warriorship. I haven't been a warrior. I'm the son of a sailor. That was enough. But I feel that the difference between a warrior and a fighter is a warrior protects and a fighter just scraps, And there's a lot of scrappiness that I don't care to repeat in my life, and I feel more about guarding what can I guard that is sacred and what is important to me, and bringing this program back to life has been very important for me as well. So the Warrior Weekend, or maybe we'll call it Guardian, I need to talk with my assistant about that, is about the physical form, mostly preparing the body for the process of learning the different shapes and asanas. And if you haven't heard the word, there it is, asana. And this is a book that was taken from a poster by a very well-known fellow in New York City. And if you do this, it becomes a flip book.
Oh, wow.
But he actually, this was done in the 80s, I think, before everything got all digitized. And he used a tripod with an old camera with film and a time release cable, himself up in shapes and bite it. And it had a timer.
He's the one who's in he's the subject?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he did, I did like just basically a book of selfies.
Yeah.
Before selfies was a dictionary. So we'll look at asana and strengthening this equipment for the journey, because here we are on this plane, this earthly plane, we have bones and muscles, and we'll look at the bandhas and how to apply that in the shapes of postures, also known as poses or positions, asanas. The deeper explanation of asana is seat of the soul. So the esoteric viewpoint of asana is that each shape we can use to enter another aspect of ourselves. And we'll talk and look at that as well. So that's the Warrior Weekend, that's the second weekend. The third weekend, I tried to look for another archetype or a synonym for this one, and there is none. And the third weekend is the Orphan. So the Orphan Weekend will be about more of a healing modalities, therapeutic modalities, and we'll start to take a peek at the Western yogas, primarily from my own experience, the Alexander technique and Feldenkrais and somatics. So these are three pretty well-known mind-body systems from the West, and a lot of them have been born out of injury. And we'll look at the creators of those and how they develop their own systems to release tension and realign their body to find a yoga, a harmony again in their vocation in their life. Also, we'll start to look at energy systems, and energy meaning prana or chi, and the chakras. Are you all familiar with the chakras? So there's 7 in yoga. There is 3 main ones in Taoist esoteric yoga, the dantians. And then when we get over to Japan, they break it all down to the hara, the most prominent one, the guts. So we'll look at that too, and that's in the third weekend of the Orphan. The fourth weekend is the Explorer. So we'll take all this information from the first 3 months of the program, and then everyone will start to formulate their own sadhana, their own practice. So within the 6 months, we have a 60-day practice as well that every individual will create on their own. And that can be a combination of the ancient wisdom, that can be also a mixture of the modern psychology, the body-based psychology, including drawing, including writing, including ecology, or cooking, nourishment, nutrition, and lots of other things. Some people go on fasts, so that will be more of a checklist that everyone can do on their own. So it's kind of a bonus. It's a training within the training. I'm actually in the middle of one right now because I figured if I'm going to be teaching this again, I better be, walking when I'm talking. So, for instance, my last sadhana, which can be defined as a means of realization, I decided to do 6 months of I'd wake up and I'd meditate for 30 minutes and then I'd run 1 mile. That was it. That's all I did for 1 month. And it was great. It was great. So I meditate for 30 minutes, run for about 10, and then have a cup of coffee. And it was very interesting watching my mind, not so much in the meditation, but more in the 1 mile run. So the Explorer will look more into ecology as well, and relation that human has with nature, and the necessity to understand, where we really come from outside of apps, outside of digitized and cyber personalities and all that stuff, which is becoming more and more part of regular life. So it's good to get back to the earth, I feel. So that's the 4th weekend, Explorer. The 5th weekend is the Sage. And the Sage weekend is where, as the training is a teacher training, where we start to formulate what is my yoga and what do I want to teach. So we learn about teaching techniques, teaching styles, demonstrations, assists, verbal assists, and also hands-on assists. And I call them assists because I'm not a chiropractor and I don't adjust people. I don't want to crack anyone's bones. And my idea is that no one can do the asanas incorrectly. There's ways that we can injure ourselves, but more than anything, as a guide, I just assist people into turning up the volume and turning down the volume on the posture. So we'll talk about all that in the Sage weekend. And then the last weekend, the archetype is the altruist. And the altruist is where everyone just gives. Everybody gives. So everyone who's in the class, whether they are there to teach or not, will formulate a class or an experience. And that can be around the yoga, that can be around meditation, which we will be doing a lot of, as well as sitting meditation, and any other combination of artistic offerings that you'd like to do, which can be writing again, or drawing, or experiences out in nature, so on and so forth. And basically, that is the through line of the archetypes for the intensive weekends. Each month we'll meet once for 3 hours, from I think 6:30 to 9:30 is what we're going to do. And so we have a weekly sangha, a weekly community, where we'll go over and reiterate some of the stuff that we're focusing on. There'll be some suggestions for readings. And for those people who like to have more of a through line of homework assignments, we'll have that as well. It's not necessarily the way to do it, but it is a way as well. Yeah, and what else? Oh, well, I don't know if all of you know this. Most of you may have heard. I've worked with veterans for the past 9 years, and I'm not necessarily a therapist. Some people call me a yoga therapist, but I just say I'm a teacher, not necessarily an instructor. Instructor I feel is different. That's someone that's going 1, 2, 3, But there's teaching, and then there's educating. So I'm more of an educator, and then I gave myself a raise and became director. But with working with people who've probably seen or done things unimaginable, basically I've used a lot of what I've taught, or what I've talked about here, with them. Deep listening, authentic communication, and I've studied a lot of PTSD. I've worked with a lot of people with PTSD, TBI, and SCI, so traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well throughout the course, because within working in that realm, I started seeing, oh, okay, well, I think there's part of that in myself as well. And through my own life experience, growing up with a father who did go to war, and who, showed a lot of behavior that I started studying. I was like, oh, that's why. So isn't karma interesting? I went the completely opposite way from the military. I was dancing in tights with beautiful women on stage, and then I was a clown for a while, and then I started teaching yoga, and then I got invited to teach for the military. So crazy. I had never even planned that. So I bring all of that to the table, and even more. But more so, it's going to be an interchange and an exchange or an interface to really drum up the compost that this wisdom has been growing in for many, many lifetimes, many, many millennia. And, well, that was a lot. So, I think I'm done for now. Any questions?
So what if you have to miss some, like, a weekend, because something's already committed?
Yeah, that happens, and we'll just make amends to that. And it could be some meetings individually, or also coming up with a project, maybe a writing project or a drawing project. Some students in the past had missed some weekends and they drew some huge posters of the chakra systems. One lady was a school teacher for kindergarten, and she drew all these posters that she used for a kindergarten class. So anything that you can use within your own disciplines and build something to learn about what it is that you weren't present for. But there will always be another way to make
catch up?
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
there printed material that,
Yeah, there'll be a manual.
so there's other ways to study if we're,
If you're absent.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you explain a little for me again, the orphan, what that involves? Was that the part where you get physically ready?
That's the warrior.
Okay.
The orphan is more about understanding through injury, using injury as a lesson, because a lot of the yogas and mind body systems we'll look at were developed from people who had injury, or who are understanding their tension in their body and learning to release it. So where there's yoga that's more forceful, and then there's a lot of yoga that's more about surrender and allowing or undoing. And we kind of do that in class sometimes, when we do all this kind of that stuff rather than all this,
Thank
so,
you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Listen.
So after the class, you get some certificate that enables you to register with the Yoga Alliance?
Yes.
Okay. And it's just a process of presenting your certificate and then you're registered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you I think what they're doing now is you can take a photograph and you send the photograph in to the Yoga Alliance, and then it goes through their processes, and then they check for its authenticity, and then they give you the green light, and then you pay your due,
Okay.
and then you get a RYT stamp.
And then how often do you have to
Re-up?
re-certify? Yeah, like every 2 years?
Every year.
Every year.
Yeah, every year. You have another question?
Yeah, so on the website it had mentioned, it talked in detail about the class schedule that you just walked us through, but it also mentioned something about needing to take additional classes,
Yes.
a certain number of classes. So is that included in the price that's listed on the website for the teacher training?
No.
No, but we do have a special pass for you all. So what did we agree on? I think it was 300 or
Have a number. It was I think it was 300 for
300
6
for
months
6
of
months of unlimited classes here.
So you can just come whenever you want for 6 months. for
Okay.
that.
And you don't
And
necessarily.
it's like little less than, it's more than 50% off of like the normal rate
Yeah.
of what you would normally pay.
And you don't have to take your classes here. You can take them elsewhere. But we want to encourage you to take them.
Right.
And
If you took them, I'm sorry.
how many additional classes?
It's unlimited.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, but the requirement for
The requirement for the training is 44
Extra,
classes, asana classes.
during the time that you're in
Yeah,
training.
so it averages out to about 2 classes a week.
Okay.
And then there's also meditation requirements, which is to sit with a group for once a week. So like it's about 22.
So
Something like that.
Danielle,
that's different than the Wednesday night with you?
Yes.
Okay.
would you consider sitting for meditation with a group? Would it count if everyone sat together? Like if the teacher trainees got together and meditated together once a week? Or do you
Yeah.
require that they go to a guided meditation by a teacher?
I think both.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's a bunch of temples in the area actually, and coming out here to work, I drove by the Wat Thai, so that there's a Thai temple, and I go there and sit from time to time. So the encouragement is that we could actually create, and that happens a lot of times in these trainings. There's subgroups that happen, and that's what I love about these experiences is the creativity starts to churn, and it really is like a compost, and stuff starts growing out of it. So yes, you could formulate a subgroup as well as sit with an established meditation sangha, and also sit by yourself, you know, so, or even take Taylor's meditation.
But can't this as your class?
Well, you know, just switch it up a little, Mariana. Yeah.
And the tracking of that would be just more like each individual tracks it themselves.
The honor
They
system.
don't
honor
have to
system.
like prove it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm not gonna police. I used to
Okay.
do that, but I'm just too stressed to
Yeah.
do that these days. You know, you'll learn what you want to learn, and you do the work, and it starts to build. You don't do the work, it doesn't. You know, it shows. So, and people work differently. There's lots of different ideas. We'll look at that too. We'll look at Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Are you all familiar with that? So it's a fellow who came up, I think he was a Harvard sociologist or maybe a psychologist. Don't quote me on that. And he came up with maybe 8 or 9 types of intelligences. They're not necessarily learning systems, but for example, some of us are more audial. We hear things and pick up. Some of us are more visual. Some of us are more tactile. Some of us are more interpersonal. I'm very interpersonal. What a surprise, huh? And then some of us are more intrapersonal, and a lot of us are a combination of those things. So we'll look at that too in the first weekend, the Wanderer Weekend. Wanderer Weekend is a lot about psychology and learning how to learn, or remembering how one learns, and then learning to unlearn in order to learn. Yes, I did say that right. Yeah. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Melissa.
So actually another one. So for the 44 classes during the 6-month period of the training, if you wanted to just take each class and pay for it individually, do you just like, is there a price per class, or is that?
Here,
Yes.
here our drop-in classes are 18.
Okay.
So I don't know, what does that come to?
Okay. I'll just.
Yeah,
But we could do it that way too if we wanted to.
you could.
Okay.
I don't know, but I didn't even think about that.
Neither did I, but it
Yeah.
would be still at a discounted rate. So I would, I would say either 10 or 12 a class.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we did $10 a class, it still comes to $440.
Oh, so it's still the 300 for unlimited.
Yeah,
is still much better.
still,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
plus too, like you were saying, Taylor does meditation here too, so if you want, that would also, I would assume.
And we
you could
may
use that
add
as
another
well.
class if that's something that's
Oh, we are gonna add another
Okay,
meditation
yeah.
class in the fall.
right.
And Daniel, I don't know if you wanna teach that.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
We'll talk about that later.
All right. All right.
Can you tell us a little more about the Yoga Alliance, that organization? And
Yeah. What I know about the Yoga Alliance is it was started to keep the government out of manipulating the teacher culture, even though yoga's become so popular now as an industry that the government did get involved. I don't know if you heard about all the stuff that happened in Virginia a few years ago, that they raised the tax on yoga studios and yoga teachings because they found that it was generating a lot of revenue. So, but anyhow, the Yoga Alliance was formed in comparison from the model for therapeutic massage, just to set a standard, a teaching standard, to promote a quality of teaching that is accessible and that is safe and that is effective. So you can look at the Yoga Alliance website, and it talks about the specifics, how many hours are spent on anatomy, how many hours are spent on ethics, how many hours are spent on technique, history, philosophy, lineage, and so on and so forth. And so this program meets those requirements and actually exceeds. All of those have to get to 200 hours, but this program I think actually has about 285. So it's over it, and you know, it's a lot. So I want to set you guys up for success. You know.
Every time you have to re-up your Yoga Alliance certification, in order to re-up it other than cash, obviously, do you have to present them with continuing education credits as you do with some other things? Or how does that work if you need to go re-up it?
That, you know, the Yoga Alliance is constantly refining itself, so it's probably on the website as well. I can't answer that question right now because I haven't looked at it in a
As
while.
of right
So.
now, we need 30 hours every 2 years.
Oh, okay.
30 every day?
Yeah.
30 hours of additional training.
Yeah, CEUs.
Yeah, and I can you can take workshops here, and some I think some of us, or I am, I'm like exceeding 500. I have like 1,000, I guess, somewhere. But you know, some of the workshops you can take those too, and they add on to that.
And then too with the once you have it, the stamp of approval from Yoga Alliance, and you've got your hours and everything is done, you can go and teach in or practice or do workshops or whatever you want, yoga related in any state that you want to, or do they govern it state by state, like differently? Because I know I'm just asking because with massage, like
Yeah.
I can do massage in Maryland, but if I
Right.
step a toe over into DC, I have to get a completely new license,
Right.
pay a new fee, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
I believe it's not like that.
Okay.
I believe it is a nationally certifying board. And there's other certifications too. I think there still is the MIA, the Mid-Atlantic Yoga Association, and also there's the California Yoga Teachers Association. I don't know if that's around anymore. And to tell you the truth, I taught for several years without being certified. So being certified really isn't necessary.
Yeah.
And there are some yoga clans out there that are doing without the certification process. But it is an industry now in this country and also in other parts of the world. And if you're to work, for example, in a spa or even in a gym, they want to have people, for the most part, who show competence in at least 200 hours of training. So there's that, yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, I guess we'll just conclude with a little sit as we started. So, you can close your eyes if you like, or you can keep them open. That's fine too. And a lot. I know I spoke a lot tonight, so what will sink in will sink in. Just notice the breath. And notice any physical feelings, temperature, maybe even sweat. And notice any sounds. And just notice the quality of your mind now. session here, I'll channel and join in if you like, or just listen. Hari Om Shanti. Namaste.
Shanti.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.